I've been using the PS5 now for 6 months, but I've been putting off doing a review for a couple of very big reasons, and I can't wait to share these with you today. So welcome back to another episode of STU'S Reviews. As a disclaimer, for those Sony fanboys about to head to the comments and go, oh, he's an Xbox fanboy, he's just slating the PS5, you're wrong. If anything, I'm a Sony fanboy. I've been playing PlayStation for years and years. All my friends play PlayStation, and I use this console the majority of the time. I'm just not a liar. I like to be as unbiased as possible to give you a broad overview of the truth about the PS5. So let's get stuck in. 6 months later, and the stock levels of the PS5 are still non-existent. So to all of you watching this that still haven't managed to get one, I'll light a candle for you and speak the sacred voodoo chants in the hope that you get one. In fact, let me know in the comments below if you're still yet to get hold of one, and if you have got hold of one, I'm really interested to know how long it took you, so let me know in the comments below. But anyway, back to the PS5. And as always, although I know you probably already know plenty about the PlayStation 5, let's just do a really quick run through of the specs. The PS5 was released on November the 12th, 2020, making that 6 years, 11 months and 28 days since the previous gen was brought out. So what have they changed about the PlayStation in all that time? Well, for starters, this console is perhaps the most unusual looking of all the PlayStation consoles before it, but more on this later. Internally, it runs a custom SoC featuring an AMD Zen 2 CPU with 8 cores and an integrated GPU, along with 16GB of GDDR6 SD RAM and 825GB SSD. There's also an internal M.2 slot and an NVMe drive, but Sony have yet to add this functionality at the time of this review. All this power amounts to being able to output in 4K, HDR compatible and 120Hz. More on this later, but lastly, the I/O on the PS5 is rather simplistic, featuring a HDMI 2.1 port, one USB-C and USB 2 on the front, along with 2 USB 3 ports on the rear, as well as an Ethernet port. Notably, it also supports Bluetooth 5.1. So overall, the PS5 looks like a huge advancement on any previous gen, but I can tell you now, all is not what it seems. Now, before I get into the shocking stuff that I've discovered after 6 months of using the PS5, let's start with the fundamental opinion on this device. As an update to the PS4, I can tell you now that the new specs combined with the new OS makes such a quality of life difference. You can turn the PS on from sleep mode and jump back into a game of Assassin's Creed Valhalla in seconds. I haven't even got time to turn my kettle on, which is a vast difference from the PS4, which would take long enough to start up and load a game that you'd have enough time to learn a language to an intermediate level. A lot of this is to do with the speedy SSD. The only problem is that it won't store much before it's full. In fact, I only have about 4 games on mine, and that's pretty much it. I've got Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Valhalla, Black Ops, and Warzone, which I'll admit is optimised notoriously and takes up far more room than it should. The problem of storage can be solved, however, by plugging in a drive via USB. However, when it originally came out, only PS4 games were capable of this functionality, but with an update back in April, PS5 games can now be stored too. The difference the new specs make to the quality of gaming are far more than any previous version. It supports technology such as ray tracing, so things look really beautiful, but for me, it's the little extra things that it can do because of the new power that makes next-gen gaming really special on the PS5. Gone are the days where you'd have a trail of about 10 footsteps in the snow. Instead, you can walk around for quite some time before the snow trail starts to disappear. And it's not just piddly little footsteps either. This is a reactive texture that gets ploughed out of the way when you walk through it. Now, as much as I appreciate the new power, there have been some controversies regarding the specs and its capabilities. The first main concern is that the PS5 is so vastly different from the PS4, and the way Sony have implemented backwards capability is so complicated that developers have complained about it. Yes, it supports PS4 titles, however, for those games to be updated to run at a higher frame rate, namely 120 frames per second, which the PS5 is capable of, it would require an entire port of the game to run natively on the PS5. Whereas with the Xbox, all that's required is a simple patch to unlock those capabilities. We've seen examples of this recently with the likes of Warzone, where developers have taken 6 months to release the capability of 120 frames per second on the PS5, which brings me to the second concern about its specs. Because games that can run at 120Hz, you're going to find there's a few trade-offs. 120Hz is considered a performance mode on the PS5, and when running titles at this, you'll either lose resolution capabilities or graphic enhancements such as ray tracing, and in some cases, you'll even lose HDR capability. Now, this is in part down to the power of the machine, certainly the graphical elements anyway, but one of the most unusual elements causing this is that the PS5's HDMI 2.1 port has a bandwidth capped at 32GB per second, which is quite a bit lower than the 40GB per second of the Series X. So, despite the overall specs seeming perfectly capable, there are absolutely some concerns with the way Sony have implemented the hardware and the software. And 6 months down the line, it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. But with that said, it often takes a while for developers to truly maximize the capabilities of the console. And at the moment, developers are still concentrating on multi-generation title releases, rather than building just for the latest hardware. So moving forward, I would expect to see a better optimization to allow every graphical element to run at once, but only time will tell. Now, interestingly, on the mention of capabilities, although the capabilities of every PS5 are equal, they are in fact not all equal at all. Now, I'm not referring here to the obvious diskless model. There's been quite a few teardowns by a few companies that have discovered several different styles across the range. Now, the fan is one of them. Some measure up to 5 decibels louder, which in my eyes is a fair amount, nearly 15% louder in fact. And it's just the luck of the draw as to which fan you get in your PS5. That would really annoy me if I knew I'd been given the one with the louder fan. And the only way of telling is opening it up and comparing it to the teardowns that you can find online. Whether this has been changed now that new production models are out after the initial batch has gone, I don't know. But one thing on the noise, the fan isn't the only thing that's been loud about it. Now, I was under the impression that this thing would run super silent when playing digital content. But alongside the audible fans, there's also a very noticeable coil whine, which is simply caused by the power being put into it. Many electrical gadgets give off coil whine, I understand that, but that's all of varying audibility. But with the PS5, or my particular model, it's very audible. Have a listen. So much so that I can hear it on the other side of the room. Now, I don't think everyone has this problem, but it does seem to be widely discussed by users on Reddit. Maybe some people are more sensitive to higher pitched noises. Maybe some PS5s really have got a louder coil whine than others. But whatever it is, the noise that it makes royally me off, to the point where I predominantly play with headphones. The thing is, once you hear it, your ears will constantly keep going back to that noise. Now, I did have another issue with noise when the console launched, in the sense that it would randomly decide to spin up the disk drive if you left the disk in, and that's even when playing digital content. It would go absolutely mental for around 15 to 30 seconds, blasting the fans as hard as it could and spinning the disk as fast as mentally possible for no reason at all. Have a listen to this and see how audible it is even inside a cabinet with the front on, and then again about half an hour later. The good news here is that this issue has been fixed in the software update back in April. Hopefully you're starting to see now why I waited to do this review. But alongside the changes for the main console, Sony have also radically changed the controller. Now, in a nutshell, there's a lot of similarities with the old style, featuring the same button set, just with a few form factor changes, which I actually prefer, and it personally feels nicer in the hands. I mean, over the past 6 months, my opinion has pretty much stayed the same. The new bits are its adaptive triggers and haptic feedback, designed to replicate things like gun triggers and to give the feeling of feedback in the controller to a level that's never been done before. And for the most part, I do believe that it's incredible. It's demonstrated amazingly in the tech demo STU'S Playroom. There's just 2 small problems with these features. Developers won't use them, and if they do, I won't use them. I just feel like this is something that's going to be forgotten about by developers, or at very, very best, the majority of circumstances lazily implemented as an afterthought in big AAA cross-gen titles. The exception will most likely be any PS5 exclusive, but I'm yet to try an experience that has really impressed me as much as the tech demo of it in STU'S Playroom. And to my second point about me never using it, this is largely down to the type of games which I play, which are mostly competitive multiplayer, such as Warzone or Black Ops. Now, by turning on the features such as the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback, you're creating essentially feedback on the controller which can hinder your performance in the game. For example, if you're trying to control recoil in an FPS, but you've got a solid trigger and vibrations from the controller, as well as crosshairs jumping around in the game, you're going to be at a distinct disadvantage to someone who has all of these features turned off. Yes, I get it, turning off the feedback could be a placebo effect, much like shaving your leg hair if you're a cyclist. But I'll take any advantage I can over the G-Fuel snorting teen sweats that play literally every night after work. Alright, we've cleared the roof, so let's just chill. Now, I'm not saying that I don't love this feature, because I do, but I guess that only time will tell if this feature becomes commonplace in games, or if it becomes like the Xbox Kinect, fun for about a day, and then will never ever be used ever again. There's one thing that the controller does really well, and that is battery life. By turning the front light low and turning off obviously all of the haptics, I got a total of 10 hours, 42 minutes and 42 seconds of use out of it, which I think is great. So they've done a great job on battery life. And there's another thing as well, and that's controller latency between wired and wireless. This is interesting. There was a survey done very recently by a chap over on Reddit, and he found that the latency when using it wired and wireless was negligible, which is shockingly surprising, because I've always thought to get the best response time you're going to need it wired into your PlayStation 5. But that isn't correct. Supposedly, wired and wireless are very, very, very close in this particular iteration, so they've done a fantastic job there. And although if you're competitive, you're probably going to use it wired anyway, it does mean that you have got a bit more flexibility if you are a competitive gamer, and you'll know that you are going to get a top response time whether you're using this wired or wireless. There is one more thing, however, that isn't so good about the controller, and that's the problems that have wormed their way to the surface since launch. And the biggest common issue that I'm seeing all over the place is stick drift. Now, this is where the controller registers thumbstick movement even if you put the controller down on a flat surface. Ever since the thumbstick was invented, stick drift has plagued people. But this is just 6 months in, and a lot of people are having this issue. Put it this way, of the 4 of us that are in my usual Warzone squad, 2 of us have had this issue. Not so good, really. Although on the flip side, as a bit of info, for those interested in controller repairability and modding, it's actually a straightforward piece to disassemble, much like the PS4 controller. And if you're interested, I made my own colorway in a tutorial on how to mod the PS5 controller, which I'll link below. This is my second controller, which I've left unmodded. Now that I've dissected the specs and capabilities, we best have talk a little bit about the huge elephant in the room. It's undeniably one of the most unusual looking consoles for quite some time. Now, I mentioned this in my unboxing of the PS5 6 months ago, and it reminded me of something from the film Oblivion with its white casing and its black sort of accents. It reminds me very much of the film Oblivion. I don't know if you've seen it, but the design in that, the design aesthetics, is very similar to this.
Are you still a defective team?
Damn right we are.
Do we not get a say in this?
If you haven't seen that unboxing, you can check it out in the description below. And I loved it at first, but now I've had it sat staring at me for several months. I hate it. It's like an itch that can't be scratched. It's an utter eyesore. It just reminds me of someone mucking about with some Pringles in their mouth. I will say that this has been an incredible move by Sony, because be it good looking or not, it's undeniably caused a lot of conversation in the media before it's released, which absolutely helped with free PR. But not only that, it works as an advertisement in people's homes. Anyone who walks into my living room instantly connects with it because it sticks out like a sore thumb. Also, if it's in the background of any videos, it'll be completely obvious as a scantily clad woman running across the screen. So, have Sony purposefully made this as ugly as humanly possible for these reasons? I believe so. Have I secretly got a tinfoil hat on? Possibly. I don't know. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Did they design something they thought looked cool? Or are we actually living in an Illuminati-controlled matrix and they did in fact make it as grotesque as possible for the free advertisements? That's the hardware, performance and design. But what about the actual interface of the PS5? Now this, in my eyes, is just as divisive as the design, because there's some stuff I really, really love, and there's some stuff that I really, really don't love. But the best bit about it is that it's much, much quicker than the PS4. You can navigate quicker, and menus and sub-menus pop up almost instantly with very minimal load times. The majority of the menu system is pretty straightforward, and there's a number of quick actions that the PlayStation will try and recommend for you based on your common or recent actions. But I'm not going to lie, I pretty much never touch those. But as an overall package, I've been very impressed as an evolution from the experience of the previous gen. But the worst thing about the PS5 interface was the new party system. I originally wanted to lock away the person who made it and throw away the key. However, my revised opinion after 6 months is that it's actually grown on me. Instead of being a throwaway group, it's meant to be more of a social room that you can gang together with friends and drop into at any time you want. And actually, I kind of like this. The only problem is that you're going to end up with a billion active parties. Let's say, for example, I'm playing a two-person game where I just want to relax with one other friend. There's no point joining a party that has 10 others in there because the chat would just get messy. Now, I've had it before where I've joined a chat and 8 people have been playing 2 separate games. That means that things get very confusing very, very quickly. So the solution is to create another party with just 4 of you. But then I'm just filling up my party list. So over time, through the natural course of making private party after private party, your list is going to get extremely confusing and will trigger those with OCD who want a clean inbox. So I like it and I hate it at the same time. But the biggest silver lining of the new party system is that joining in and out of chat is super snappy and quick, which is a hell of a lot faster than the painful previous gen, which took a good 20 to 30 seconds to load the party screen and join a chat. Now, aside from the poor design of the party chat, there have been some serious bugs and issues. The first issue actually pertains to this review and how I got the video clips off the PS5. Recording and viewing a clip is absolutely fine, but actually getting them off the PlayStation has been an utter nightmare. Firstly, Twitter doesn't seem to work from mine. It loads up and won't let me sign in for no reason at all. So sharing to Twitter is completely out of the question. I was hoping to do that and then pull the videos off there. Then I tried plugging in hard drives, none of which the PS5 seemed to like. I tried thumb drives, SSDs, and it just wouldn't let me transfer. It would detect the hard drive, but not allow the transfer. Evidently, as you've seen by this review so far, I got it working in the end, but Christ, it tested all of my patience and shows another example where the software isn't the best. What would have been better is if it allowed you to send the clips to your phone in some way. The semi-workaround to this is by sending in a PS message, which then allows you to play it on your phone. But this hasn't been the only weird glitch in the software that I've experienced. I've had all sorts of glitches, and even one full system crash where I had to unplug it from the wall, restart it and let it rebuild its storage for 10 minutes. I've had games uninstall themselves automatically. I've had games installed twice. There's been a huge number of these problems, especially in the early days when I first got my hands on it. Not what I expected from a £450 machine that Sony have essentially had 7 years to finish, assuming they started work on it immediately after launch of PS4. But my thoughts on the cost of the PS5 is that it was priced way lower than anything I anticipated. I was well expecting the console to be around 600 quid. So when they announced the physical disc version, which I bought for only £449, I rejoiced. I mean, let's face it, if you play for the same lifespan that the PS4 was out, then you're looking at £5 a month, which is as cheap as chips. So start saving now for PS6. Now the discless version is even cheaper, but buying the digital only is a bit of a false economy if you aren't into buying games on release date. Like I've said in previous discless versus disc arguments, it's often cheaper to buy games later on at a discount when they're in bargain bucket places like Game or CEX. But the problem here is the absolute scalpers. Scalpers, in a nutshell, have increased the price so much of the console that those who want to buy immediately and not wait are forced to shell out £700 plus easily on places like eBay and other enterprising online stores who think they can raise the price. Scumbags. But anyway, let me conclude my thoughts on the PS5. Overall, I believe this launch has been utter shambles. It would seem on the surface that Sony rushed it out of production to try and bring out the console at a similar time to Microsoft, which is why I've given it a few months and waited longer than most to share my opinions of this device. I believe they rushed it because at first it was super rough around the edges, with tons of people reporting crashes and bricked console amongst other things. And like I've said, I myself suffered a number of crashes within the first few months. I've waited to try and be a bit fairer about the machine to see what they can get fixed in a few months' time. And I must say that Sony are well along the road to making this the console I hoped it would be. I've not suffered a crash for a good few months, which is fantastic. And although there are a few little issues which I've explained already, it feels much more like a solid product than when it was first originally launched. I still don't think that it's 100% a finished product, and I still think that it was rushed to be brought out. But I'm hoping that in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to start to see the PS5 at its best and in the position I hoped it would be at launch. So, if you've yet to get hold of one, but you've been trying, I wouldn't lose any sleep because the experience has been somewhat rocky from the start. The good news is that the experience is getting better with each update. And here's the $1 million question. Right now, in this month, June 2021, is the PS5 a good console? Of course it is. It's miles and miles ahead of the PS4 in terms of its capabilities, as I've said already. But I'm really excited to see where Sony take it next and what devs can do to get the most out of this next-gen machine. They've made some unusual choices and certainly rushed certain elements, but I still thoroughly enjoy it despite its rather long list of shortcomings. If you enjoyed today's video and you found it useful at all, I would really appreciate if you return the favour and hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you get notifications when new episodes land. And if you are a user on Twitch, don't forget to follow me over on Twitch as well, because I will be streaming over there some of my terrible Warzone plays, but I will try and entertain you at very least. And I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.